Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're taking a look at the idea of matter and consciousness.
Oh, okay.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at an article called Minding Matter by Adam Frank. And he sort of brings up this idea that, we often go about our day-to-day lives assuming that the world is just made up of solid stuff.
Right.
But what if matter itself is actually way more mysterious
Absolutely.
than we think?
Yeah. When we really start to think about matter at that subatomic level, it really kind of breaks down our intuitive understanding of it as just like, solid stuff out there.
Right, and so that's kind of what we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah.
So if matter isn't as straightforward as we thought,
Yeah.
what does that mean for consciousness? Like, is it really just a product of the brain's physical processes, like materialists believe?
Yeah, well, and I think that materialism has a certain appeal because it just seems like the simplest explanation. Like if everything is made of matter, well, then naturally consciousness would have to arise from matter as well.
Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, it's like if you kick a rock, it's definitely solid.
Right. Channeling your inner Samuel Johnson there.
There you go.
That was his famous refutation of idealism.
Yeah, but even that rock, when you like zoom into the quantum level, it becomes a lot more complicated. It's
Yes,
just
yeah,
this like solid thing. And I remember, being a physics student,
Yeah.
and I remember asking my professor, like, what is an electron?
Mm-hmm.
And I was expecting, like, a nice, neat answer.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's this tiny little particle, and it has a negative charge.
Right.
But his answer was, and I kid you not,
Oh, I'm ready.
he said, an electron is that to which we attribute the properties of an electron.
Wow.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, and I think that kind of a non-answer or a circular answer actually speaks to a fundamental shift
Right.
in how we had to start thinking about the physical world. We went from this classical physics world of Newton, EFA, where we thought we could precisely define the position and the velocity of a particle. And everything was, predictable,
Right.
deterministic, kind of like clockwork. But then quantum mechanics comes along and
Yeah.
throws that neat and tidy picture completely out the window. Instead of existing in this defined state, particles exist as what's called a wave function,
Okay.
which is basically a spread of probabilities.
So instead of knowing exactly where an electron is, we
Yeah.
just know, like, the probability of finding it in a certain location.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's like smeared out across space.
Yeah, precisely. It doesn't have like a definite position until it's measured.
Mhm.
And so that's where we get into this even weirder territory of what's called the measurement problem.
Like, so we've got this electron. It exists as like a cloud of possibility.
Yeah,
And then someone comes along and they try to measure it.
right.
What happens?
Well, the act of measuring it seems to force the wave function to what they say is collapse.
Okay.
And it chooses one possibility from that spread of potential.
So does that mean that, like, the observer, like the person making the measurement,
Right.
is actually like influencing reality?
It's a mind-boggling question. And that's where we get into all of these different interpretations of quantum mechanics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there are like different ways of understanding what's going on?
There are a bunch of ways. And
Yeah.
each one has these really radically different implications for how we understand reality, the nature of matter,
Right.
and, as you pointed out earlier, consciousness itself.
This is where it gets really interesting. So let's dive into those.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So one of the earliest interpretations, and still one of the most popular, is the Copenhagen interpretation.
Okay.
And this interpretation basically says that, before a measurement is made, it's kind of meaningless to talk about the properties of a particle as if they have like definite values.
Oh, so it's not that the electron, like, is somewhere specific.
Right.
It's that our knowledge of it is just limited
Exactly.
until we make a measurement.
All right. Yeah, the Copenhagen interpretation really emphasizes the role of observation in shaping our knowledge of that
Yeah.
quantum world. It's almost like the act of measuring
Right.
isn't just revealing what's already there, it's kind of participating in bringing that reality into focus.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
But isn't that a little bit of a cop-out?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we just saying that we don't have to worry about what's really going on as long as our measurements work out?
Well, I can see why you would say that because it definitely challenges our common sense notion
Right.
of an objective reality, that exists independently of us.
Right.
But there are other interpretations that try to address that concern,
Okay.
like the many worlds
Oh,
interpretation.
yeah, the one with all the parallel universes.
Exactly.
All right, how does that one work?
So the many worlds interpretation says that every time a quantum measurement is made,
Yep.
the universe actually splits and creates a new branch for each possible outcome.
Whoa.
So, in one universe, the electron is measured in this location, and in another universe, it's measured in that location.
So there's a copy of me in each one of these universes living out every possible
That's the idea.
version of my life.
Although it's important to note that these universes would be completely separate from each other,
Okay.
unable to interact.
Gotcha.
But it does offer a way of resolving this measurement problem without resorting to the observer,
Right.
somehow creating reality.
Okay, but wouldn't that mean that there are infinite universes constantly branching off
Yeah.
with every tiny little quantum measurement? That seems a little extravagant, doesn't it?
Extravagant, maybe,
Yeah.
but also kind of elegant in its own way. The math works out really beautifully,
Okay.
and it avoids some of those philosophical headaches of the other interpretations.
Okay, so we've got these two wild interpretations of quantum mechanics.
Right.
The Copenhagen interpretation, where the observer is playing a role in shaping reality.
Right.
And then the many worlds interpretation with its infinite branching universes.
Yeah.
Which one is right?
And that's the catch. There's no scientific way to prove
Lumra.
which interpretation is the correct one. They all make the same predictions about the outcomes of experiments.
Okay.
So it ultimately comes down to which one you find more philosophically satisfying.
So we're left with like a choose your own adventure
In a way, yes.
story of the universe.
And this ambiguity is exactly why this strict materialist view of the world, where
Yeah.
everything can be reduced to just matter and its interactions, starts to break down.
Yeah.
Because if we can't even say for sure what matter is,
Right.
how can we be so sure that consciousness is simply a material phenomenon?
So you're saying that quantum mechanics kind of pulls the rug out from under the materialists.
Yeah, I think it raises some serious questions about that. Remember how we were talking about earlier
Yeah.
about that seemingly solid rock, but it's at the quantum level, it becomes this cloud of possibilities.
Right.
Well, if matter itself is fundamentally uncertain,
Yeah.
can we really say that consciousness, with all of its richness and complexity, is simply a product of this uncertain stuff?
Right.
You know?
So where does that leave us?
Hmm.
If materialism isn't the answer, what is?
Well, that brings us back to what the philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness,
Okay.
which is this problem of how do we explain subjective experience?
Right.
Like, how do we explain the feeling of what it's like to be conscious?
Yeah, you can point to all the neurons firing in the brain.
Right.
But that doesn't tell you what it's like to experience the color red.
Right.
Or the feeling of pain.
Exactly. These subjective experiences seem to be something more than
Right.
just physical processes. And I think if we take seriously the weirdness of quantum mechanics,
Mhm.
the possibility emerges that consciousness might actually be a fundamental aspect of reality itself.
So instead of consciousness arising from matter, could it be the other way around?
You're getting it.
Could matter, in some sense, be a manifestation of consciousness?
Now you're thinking like some of the pioneers at the frontiers of this field.
Whoa.
It's a radical idea, but some physicists and philosophers are starting to explore it seriously.
Okay, hold on. If consciousness is fundamental,
Yeah.
wouldn't that make the observer, like the one making those quantum measurements, even more important than we originally thought?
Yeah, you're connecting the dots beautifully.
Nice.
And this reminds me of that quote from Adam Frank's article where he says, "It's not the electron's wave function, it's your wave function."
Right.
Highlighting this idea that the observer might be inextricably linked to the observed.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together.
Yeah.
But my head is spinning a little bit.
Sure.
We've gone from kicking rocks to questioning the nature of reality.
It's a big jump.
It is a big jump. What does this all actually mean?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it might not have a single definite answer. But I think the most important takeaway is that quantum mechanics opens up all of these new ways of thinking
Yeah.
about the relationship between mind and matter and between ourselves and the universe.
So maybe instead of trying to reduce consciousness to something that's purely physical, we need to consider this possibility that Consciousness is woven into the fabric of reality itself.
It's a perspective shift
Right.
from this reductionist view that has
Right.
really dominated science for so long.
Right. But wouldn't that kind of turn our whole understanding of the universe upside down?
Well, maybe it's time for a little cosmic headstand.
I like that. So are we saying that the materialists have it all wrong?
I wouldn't say it's about being right or wrong. I
Yeah.
think it's more about expanding our perspective and recognizing that the universe might be far more mysterious and wondrous than we
Well,
ever imagined.
okay, I'm on board with that. But how do we even begin to explore these new possibilities? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, that's the exciting part. It's like we're standing at the edge of a whole new scientific frontier. And Adam Frank, he makes this really interesting point in his article about how we tend to view different interpretations of quantum mechanics. Like, why is it that the many worlds interpretation, the one with the infinite parallel universes,
Yeah.
is often seen as like the more sober or the more like scientific view,
Right.
while interpretations that give a central role to consciousness
Right.
are often dismissed as like mystical or new agey.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's almost as if we're more comfortable with the idea of an infinite number of universes than we are with the possibility that our own minds might be fundamentally intertwined with reality.
Right. So it's not just about like scientific evidence.
Right.
It's also about our own like preconceptions
Yeah, I think so.
and biases
Right.
about what's considered acceptable in science. Yeah, and maybe it's because, accepting the role of consciousness kind of challenges that traditional separation between the observer and the observed.
Right.
That subject-object split that's been like a cornerstone of Western science
Right.
for centuries.
So are we saying that that traditional view is wrong?
I don't know if I would necessarily say wrong, but maybe incomplete.
Okay.
Quantum mechanics seems to be pointing us towards a more holistic view,
Yeah.
this recognition that the universe might be more interconnected and
Well,
interdependent
right.
than we previously thought.
And maybe it's that interconnectedness that makes the whole idea of consciousness so baffling.
Yeah.
Because it's not just this thing that's like located in our heads, but it's somehow part of this larger web of relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And maybe that's also why it's so hard to pin down and
Yeah.
explain. We're trying to understand a part of the system from within the system itself.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So what's the next step? How do we move beyond those limitations?
Well, I think it starts with being open to new possibilities, right?
Right.
Like exploring different frameworks, different perspectives.
Okay.
Frank argues that instead of trying to reduce consciousness to matter,
Yeah.
we need to start thinking about the two as fundamentally intertwined.
So like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. And
Yeah.
maybe by studying both sides of that coin, we can gain a deeper understanding of both matter and de-consciousness.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
But it also sounds like a pretty daunting task.
Sure.
Where do we even begin?
Well, I think one really important step is to bring together insights from different fields,
Yeah.
like physics, neuroscience, philosophy, psychology. It's a really complex problem, so it requires that multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, it sounds like we need a whole new kind of science.
Yeah,
One that doesn't shy away from the mystery of consciousness.
exactly. And maybe, just maybe, by embracing that mystery, we can open ourselves up to a more complete and awe-inspiring understanding of who we are
Right.
and our place in the universe.
Well, there you have it, folks. If consciousness isn't simply reducible to matter, what does this mean for our understanding of ourselves
Yeah.
and our place in the universe?
It's a question that really invites us to explore those frontiers of human knowledge and consider the possibility that the universe might be even more wondrous and mysterious than we ever imagined. And I think that's a truly exciting prospect.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into minding matter. Until next time.